Hi, my name is Nasser al-Gahtani, and I am a follower of Yeshua al-Masih, that is Jesus the Messiah. And I am going to answer the question in this video, why I believe that Jesus is God. Growing up in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I certainly wasn't taught that, did not believe that, had a lot of respect for the prophet Jesus, and didn't really understand why it is that Christians talk about Jesus as God. And it wasn't until I began to study the Bible and what the Bible has to say about Jesus, what Jesus has to say about himself, that I started to at least understand why Christians believed that. There's a lot I could say about that, but the short answer, the reason why Christians believe that Jesus is God is because this is actually what the Bible teaches. Now, if you don't believe that the Bible is from God, then that's not very helpful. But if you've become convinced, and I have definitely become convinced, that the Bible is a supernatural work of written artistry that is unified in its message and in harmony with itself across dozens of different stories and collections of poetry and writings and all of that, then that's the conclusion. Like I just don't believe that you can read this book and not see that it is clearly, that is the message that it's communicating. And the fact that the only person who could solve the problems introduced in the first few pages of this story in Genesis, the only person that can solve this is God himself. That's super clear, even though there's hints of what that's going to look like in the beginning. As you go on through the story over and over and over again, it becomes clear that this is a God who loves his creation, who loves humanity, is not tolerant of human evil and disobedience, sees that as a problem, but who also recognizes that humans cannot be the solution themselves. They can't get themselves out of this hole that they've found themselves in. In fact, all they seem to be able to do is dig themselves deeper and deeper into this hole. But why Jesus? Why not someone else? And how is it if Jesus is God, and yet he lived a life on planet Earth as a man, as a human being? How can both of those things be true? And I think as an example of how the Bible works, to tell us stories that we may not always understand the first time we read them, why they're there, but then as we continue to read, we can look back and see how that story was preparing us for an idea, for thought, or question that we would have later. It's, again, part of the wisdom and just brilliance of this book. We have a story in Genesis chapter 35. I'm not gonna read it. I'm just gonna share it, and you can go and look that up if you want to. But we have a story of Yaqub, of Jacob, and he's returning back to the land, what will become the land of Israel one day. And he's brought his whole family with him, and all his children and animals and servants and all of that. And one of his wives, Rachel, is pregnant. And as they're traveling, she goes into labor. She begins to give birth, and it's not going well for her. And as she finally delivers her baby, and it's a baby boy, and she knows that she's dying. It's been a very painful, bloody birth, and she names her son Ben Oni, which means son of my sorrow, or son of my suffering. As if this is what's been produced, like all my pain, all my suffering was for this. And she dies. Right after naming him, she dies. And then Jacob comes and sees both, on the one hand, he has this new baby boy, this new son, and yet his wife, whom he has loved since the moment he laid eyes on her, is now gone, and he's so heartbroken. And this is all not spelled out for us in the story, but as a human, you read and you can understand, based on their history, how he must be feeling and how broken up he is about this. That this is probably the worst day of his life, and he's had some hard days in this story. And yet he looks at this baby boy now. That's all he has left from his wife, and his the midwives, those who had helped deliver, let him know, she gave him a name, and it's Ben Oni. And Jacob decides in that moment that he can't bear to call his son by that name, and so he gives him another name, a second name. He calls him Benjamin, or we say in English Benjamin. And Benjamin means son of my right hand, or my right arm, son of my strength, because he can't bear to associate his son with this horrible day of sorrow and grief and pain. And so Benjamin grows up, but he always carries with him these two names. That one name doesn't replace the other. That he will be the strong right arm of his father doesn't bring his mother back to life. He will always be the fruit, the son of his mother's pain and sorrow in childbirth. He's going to carry that nature, that identity with him. But on the other hand, he can also be the right hand of his father and carry that identity and nature at the same time. They seem contradictory, but he is the son of his mother and his father, and so he can carry both of those things. Now, what does that have to do with Jesus? Or let's be less specific. What does that have to do about God's plan to rescue humanity? Well, throughout the prophets, in the stories of the Bible, we see these statements being made by God of talking about the future days, talking about when he will send his Messiah, who will rescue Israel, who will bring light and life and peace to the nations. When God talks about this person, he seems at times to talk about as if he himself is actually going to be the one to rescue his people. He himself is going to be the one who will be pierced by his people. He himself will be the one who will make his way back to the land of Israel and to Jerusalem to set things right. And then at other times it seems as if there's a human person who is coming. Moses talks about one who will come in the same, who will be like Moses, but better. One who, when he speaks, it'll be as if God himself is speaking to us. David, is told that there will be a son that will come from his lineage, who will sit on his throne and who will rule forever, who will never, whose reign will never end. We're told that there will be one who will be a high priest, but of a different order, a different lineage than the priests that come from the tribe of Levi. That there's going to be this one coming who will be above and beyond all the other prophets, all the other priests, everything that Israel had experienced in human leaders, that this one who is coming, this Messiah, is going to surpass all of them. And how can that be? The prophet Isaiah, I believe, was very much inspired by the story of Benjamin. And so when he writes in some of his poems looking forward to the day when God would rescue his people and rescue the world, and what that looks like, he uses these kind of dual language from the story of Benjamin. He talks throughout this last half of the book of Isaiah. You'll see references where God's talking about how he's going to show or bear or reveal his holy arm, his right arm, that with his right hand he is going to rescue humanity, and that many eyes will see it, and that salvation will come for his people. And you see this language constantly about the right hand, the right arm, his holy arm. And intermixed with this are also these poems about this chosen servant that God will raise up. And I want to read for you from Isaiah. This is in the later parts of the book of Isaiah. When you look at Isaiah 52 and 53, he talks about, I'm just going to read just so much here, but for time's sake, I'm just going to read a few verses. It talks about, and I'll just start in Isaiah 53, verse 1. Who has believed what he has heard from us, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? That's interesting. He's talking about, again, the arm of the Lord. For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. So here, in talking about this Messiah person who is coming, this messianic figure, we have in the same passage him being referred to as a man of sorrow, and also as the arm of the Lord, Benjamin and Ben-Oni. And it goes on to say in the same passage, so just starting at verse 4, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. So clearly, this person is going to carry the pain, the sins, the sorrows of the nations upon himself. And how is it that this person can, as a human agent, how is it that they can do this? How can they be this man of sorrows and at the same time be this right arm of God, able to actually carry it? And there's a clue, there's a hint for us in the text. And this is one of the many ways that the Bible works, is that sometimes there will be certain phrases or words that are very, very rare. They're only used 2 times in all of Scripture. And when that happens, that's usually a sign for us that the author has intentionally used this very rare phrase to draw a link between two different passages in his writing. So he wants you to think, when you see that phrase, like, hey, I think I've only seen that one other time. Where have I seen that? And he's inviting you to go back and reread that story or that poem, and then ask the question, why are these two connected? What do they have in common? And the linking verse here at the end of Isaiah is actually just the chapter right before this in Isaiah 52. It leads right up into what I just read. So in Isaiah 52, verse 13, it says, "Behold, my servant," this is who he's been talking about, "shall act wisely. He shall be high and lifted up and shall be exalted." So this person that we just read about in Isaiah 53, God says that he shall be high and lifted up and shall be exalted. Now, you wouldn't think this, but actually that phrase, high and lifted up, only appears two places in the whole Hebrew Bible. In the whole Bible, it only appears twice. And the only other time it is actually also in the book of Isaiah. So it's not an accident. Isaiah has used this phrase very intentionally to link this servant that we see in Isaiah 52 and Isaiah 53 with another vision that Isaiah had in chapter 6. So all the way. So if you flip back, it says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple." And it goes on to describe the scene and the angels that were around him and the voice and fire. Amazing. You can read that for yourself. But the only two places in the scriptures, and it's in both of them in Isaiah, where you see the phrase high and lifted up in the Hebrew, are Isaiah 6, Isaiah 52. On this one, the one who is high and lifted up is the Creator God who made the heavens and the earth. And in Isaiah 52, we see this servant, this Benjamin and Benoni character, who will take upon himself the sins and the pain of his people and the nations in order to bring them healing and forgiveness and restoration. And you see, by linking these two phrases, the writer of Isaiah has taken these two images and he said they're the same image. They're the same. The same God that I saw on the throne, high and lifted. I couldn't even look upon his face. Somehow he will take on the form and nature of this man who is coming, we won't recognize him, and Isaiah is really clear about, we will see him, we'll reject him, we'll despise him, we'll say it's impossible. There's no way that God could or would want to come like this to us, to serve us. How ridiculous. And yet that's what the prophet wrote. And when this Jesus came, when he was born, and as he grew and lived among the people in Israel, those who had eyes to see saw that there was something different about this man, and how he taught, how he spoke, how he loved. And though they couldn't believe it at the time, in his death, even in his death on the cross, those who witnessed it said there was something different about even how he died. And it was only when he rose again on the third day, as he said he would, that they recognized that somehow Isaiah was right, and the mystery has been revealed of how God was going to rescue his people through some human agent. He came himself as the human agent to rescue humanity and to give us eternal life. And this is just a small taste. There's so many stories like this. The Bible is filled. It is absolutely filled with them. And the best way for you to discover that is not to listen to me, but to discover that for yourself by reading this book and by praying and asking God to lead you and guide you into truth and wisdom. Thank you so much for watching.